When I asked about my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "He's long gone." My name is Maggie, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing my son, I was being erased from his life. Would you have fought back or walked away in silence? Tell me in the comments, because I still wonder what others would have done. I was arranging the white lilies on my kitchen counter when the phone rang. The stems were damp and slippery in my hands, leaving faint streaks of water across the laminate. The smell was sharp and clean, just the way Daniel used to like it when he was a boy. Lilies had always been his favorite. Every Easter, every spring recital, he begged for them instead of roses. I had bought them earlier that afternoon, thinking, maybe foolishly, that I would carry them to the hospital the next day. The doctors had assured me there was still time, that he was stable. I wanted to surprise him with something familiar, something that spoke of home. The phone's jarring ring snapped through the quiet of the kitchen, cutting through the hum of the refrigerator and the steady drip of the coffee pot. I balanced the last stem in my hand, wiped the water onto a dish towel, and lifted the receiver. "Hello?" Her voice came cold, clipped, without hesitation. "Maggie, I'm calling about the funeral arrangements." I froze. The lily slipped from my fingers and landed on the linoleum with a soft thud. "The funeral?" The word stuck in my throat like a bone. "What funeral?" "Daniel's," she said flatly, as though it were a matter of paperwork, not life. "He's long gone." The hum of the refrigerator grew louder in the silence that followed. My chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. "No," I whispered. "That's not—" Dr. Henderson said the surgery went well. He told me Daniel was resting, stable. "That was 2 days ago. Things changed," Vanessa replied. Her tone held no tremor, no compassion. "Complications set in yesterday evening. He's gone. We've already planned the service. It'll be small, just close friends." I gripped the counter so tightly that my knuckles whitened. The lilies leaned precariously in their vase beside me, a few petals already loosening and drifting down to the floor. "Why didn't anyone call me? Why didn't you call me?" "I tried," she said briskly. "You didn't answer." "That isn't true," I snapped, fumbling for my cell phone lying beside the coffee maker. My fingers shook as I scrolled through my recent calls, my eyes blurring with tears. Not a single missed call from her. Not from the hospital. Nothing. I held the phone tighter, as if sheer pressure could force the truth to appear on the screen. "There are no calls from you," I whispered into the receiver. "Well, maybe your phone was off. It doesn't matter now. The funeral is set. Thursday, 2 o'clock. She rustled papers in the background as if organizing groceries, not someone's life. That's very soon," I stammered. "Don't we need more time to plan? To notify family?" "It's planned already," she said. "Pastor Graham from my church will officiate. The guest list is finalized." Her church. Not the church where Daniel had been baptized, where he sang in the children's choir until he was 12, where his voice cracked on Christmas carols but still carried the melody. No, hers. A place I had never stepped foot in, where I was never welcome. "Vanessa, please," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "We should talk about this. Daniel was my son. I need to be part of this." She sighed heavily, the way one does when a stranger holds up the line at the grocery store. "Honestly, Maggie, I've been thinking, it might be better if you didn't come at all." The air left my lungs. I actually stepped backward, my hip bumping against the kitchen table. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. It would be too emotional, too complicated. Daniel wouldn't have wanted a scene at his funeral." A scene. She said it as if my grief, raw, uncontained, were theater. As if a mother crying for her son were improper, embarrassing. "Vanessa, you can't be serious," I said, my voice breaking. "He was my son, my only child." "He was my husband," she countered coolly. "And frankly, Where have you been these last 5 years? You barely called. You barely visited. Don't pretend now that you were close." Each word landed like a knife because there was just enough truth in them to sting. I hadn't called as much as I should have. I hadn't visited as often as I wanted. But every time I tried, there was always some reasons that often came from her mouth. Daniel was tired. They had plans. She insisted it wasn't a good time. "I tried," I whispered. The tears blurred my sight again. "Every time I planned to visit, something came up. You said he was too tired, or that you had plans, or—" "Exactly," she cut me off. "You tried. That's not the same as being there." The phone felt heavier in my hand. My knees threatened to buckle. I looked around the kitchen as though some proof of my love would materialize on the countertops, the half-finished quilt draped over a chair, the photos magnetized to the fridge, the lilies now scattered across the floor. "I should at least— the children," I blurted. "I should see the children. Daniel's kids." There was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. A short, sharp laugh. "Children? Maggie, we never had children. I don't know what Daniel told you, but we decided against kids years ago. My career, his health, it wasn't right for us. We were happy as just the two of us." Her words unraveled me further. I remembered Daniel's voice telling me about a baby learning to walk, about a toddler's drawings pinned to the fridge. He had shown me pictures, photos I now realized must have been borrowed, fabricated. Why would he lie to me about that? "I don't understand," I murmured. "Well, there's nothing more to understand right now," she said briskly. "The service is Thursday, 2:00. Peterson's funeral home, Maple Street. If you insist on coming, fine, but keep it together. This isn't about you." The line went dead. I stood there in my quiet kitchen, the cordless phone limp in my hand. The coffee pot sputtered and hissed, finishing its cycle. A lily petal clung to the sole of my slipper, soft and wet against my skin. The room tilted. My son was gone, buried in plans made without me, and I had learned about it as though it were an inconvenience, an errand to be checked off a list. The lilies lay across the floor like fallen soldiers. I bent down to gather them, but my hands shook so violently that I dropped them again. I pressed my palm to the cool linoleum to steady myself. "What funeral?" I whispered into the empty room. The words vanished into the hum of the refrigerator, leaving me with only the scent of lilies and the crushing silence of a mother uninvited. By the time I learned the time, my son was already buried. The words circled in my head like a cruel chant, a truth too sharp to hold. I sat at the kitchen table, my cell phone lying in front of me like an untrustworthy witness. I wanted proof, some electronic confirmation that I hadn't been so easily cut out. But the screen glowed blank. No missed calls, no messages, no trace that anyone had tried to reach me. The lilies I had dropped earlier lay wilted across the floor, their fragrance growing heavy, almost suffocating. I pressed a hand to my chest, then picked up the phone again. If Vanessa had told me the truth, then Daniel had been at St. Mary's Hospital. I dialed the number with trembling fingers. "St. Mary's, how may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice was bright, too bright for my unsteady breathing. "My son," I managed. "Daniel Carter. He was a patient there. I was told he passed away yesterday evening. Could you transfer me to patient information?" I was put on hold. Cheerful piano music filled my ear, jarring against the dread in my chest. When the line clicked again, another voice answered. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have no record of a Daniel Carter being admitted here in the past 6 months." "That can't be right," I protested, my hand clenched around the phone until my palm went clammy. "He had surgery 2 days ago. Dr. Henderson was his surgeon." "I'm sorry," the voice repeated. "We don't have a Dr. Henderson on staff. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. Had I imagined the name? Had I assumed the hospital? The conversations with Daniel blurred in my memory. Fragmented updates, assurances that he was fine, promises of surgeries and recoveries that now crumbled into dust. I ended the call and immediately dialed Peterson's funeral home, the one Vanessa had named. A woman answered, her tone professional but gentle. "Peterson Funeral Home, this is Margaret."
"My son," I whispered. "Daniel Carter. There's supposed to be a service."
"Oh, yes," she said with quiet certainty. Everything was arranged as Mrs. Carter requested. Closed casket, small service, immediate family only. "Will you be bringing the flowers, or shall we handle that?" My breath caught. "I'm not Mrs. Carter. I'm his mother." Silence, then a stammer. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Your daughter-in-law specifically said you wouldn't be attending, that you preferred to grieve privately." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "She said I wasn't coming?" "I assumed." Margaret's voice faltered. "But the service, it was originally scheduled for Thursday. Mrs. Carter called an hour ago and moved it up. It's already taken place, 10 o'clock this morning." The room tilted around me. Less than 12 hours earlier, while I had been drinking my morning coffee and pruning the garden, my son had been lowered into the ground. Alone. Without me. I hung up before I could cry into the receiver. The house felt cavernous. The refrigerator hummed steadily. The coffee pot clicked as it cooled. I pressed my palms to the table, trying to steady my breath. My son was gone, buried without me. The memories began to seep in. The little slights, the exclusions that at the time had felt like misunderstandings. The first and sharpest was his wedding day. Vanessa had insisted I sit in the second row. "It will be easier," Daniel had said apologetically. "Her grandmother needs the front because of her wheelchair." I'd smiled and nodded, swallowing the sting, telling myself it didn't matter as long as he was happy. But the photographs captured it forever. Me, the mother of the groom, smiling politely from behind rows of strangers while Vanessa's family filled the front. I wandered into the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my slippers, and opened the door to Daniel's old bedroom. The air smelled faintly of dust and the faint sweetness of old baseball cards tucked away in drawers. His trophies rattled gently on their shelves when I brushed past the desk. I sat on his bed, the quilt still faded from years of washing, and held one of the trophies in my lap. A golden figure of a boy mid-swing, a nameplate engraved with Little League 1997. I ran my finger over the letters. The hum of a lawnmower drifted in through the window. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, tending to her grass with the same diligence she had kept for decades. The normalcy of it jarred me. The world outside kept turning, blades of grass trimmed, while my world splintered. A knock at the doorframe startled me. Mrs. Patterson stood there, her gardening gloves still on, her hair tucked under a sun hat. She peered into the room, her expression soft. "I heard the news, Maggie. I'm so sorry." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. She stepped inside and sat beside me, the mattress dipping under her weight. "You tried so often," she murmured. "I remember seeing you pack up the car for visits, and then you'd come back early, saying it wasn't the right time." My throat tightened. She always had a reason. Too busy, too tired, the timing wasn't good. Mrs. Patterson removed her gloves slowly, placing them in her lap. "I know. I saw you pacing the porch, phone in hand, trying to reschedule. I thought, well, maybe that's just family life, but I could see how much it hurt you." Tears blurred my vision. She kept him from me all this time, and I didn't even realize how much I was losing. Mrs. Patterson laid a hand on mine. Her skin was warm, her touch steady. "You didn't lose him, Maggie. Not in the way you think. I heard the way he talked about you years ago. He loved you. That doesn't disappear." Her words offered a small flicker of warmth, but it was quickly swallowed by the heavier truth pressing down on me. "Then why didn't he fight harder?" I whispered. "Why didn't he come? Mrs. Patterson shook her head slowly. Sometimes, when someone builds enough walls, you don't realize how high they've gotten until it's too late. The dust in the room glimmered in the slant of late afternoon light. I looked around, at the diplomas still crooked on the wall, the baseball glove curled stiff with age, the posters of bands he once loved, all frozen, untouched since the day he moved out. I clutched the trophy tighter, the edges digging into my palms. The realization spread through me like cold water. Vanessa hadn't just excluded me from the funeral. She had been pushing me out for years, one missed birthday, one canceled dinner at a time. The sound of the lawnmower faded into silence, leaving only the quiet rattle of the old window frame in the wind. I whispered into the room, into the dust and trophies and the faded quilt. When did I lose my son? The walls gave no answer, only the weight of absence pressing heavier than the air itself. I wasn't only grieving Daniel's death, I was grieving the slow erasure of me from his life. That realization came one snowy afternoon in early 2020, when the silence of the house pressed so heavily that I had to do something with my hands. I pulled down the old stack of calendars I kept tucked in the corner cabinet. Each one marked with notes in my looping handwriting, plans, birthdays, dinners, hospital appointments. Life, as I once believed it. I spread them across the dining table, pages curling upward from years of being stacked away. The entries leapt at me like small betrayals. March 15th, visit Daniel, canceled, Vanessa sick. April 22nd, Easter dinner, moved to her parents. June 3rd, Daniel's birthday, rescheduled, never happened. I turned the pages faster, my breath quickening. Over and over, the same pattern. My plans crossed out, replaced by neat little excuses scribbled in the margins. Too busy, too tired, next time. Next time had vanished into never. The coffee pot burbled behind me, its smell sharp and bitter, grounding me as my stomach twisted. I reached for my phone and scrolled through old messages. At first, they had been warm, his words full of affection. Love you, Mom. Can't wait to see you Sunday. That was 3 years ago. Then, later. Hey, something came up. Rain check? 1 year ago. Call you later. And then silence. Or messages so short they barely looked like him at all. The house was quiet except for the hum of the furnace and the muffled scrape of a shovel outside. Someone clearing snow from their sidewalk. I let my thumb hover over a message dated 2 winters earlier. Daniel had written, "Hope you're doing okay. Vanessa said you didn't want me to come when you had surgery. Glad you're better now." I gripped the phone tighter, my heart hammering. My appendectomy. The sudden pain, the emergency room, the 4 days in a sterile hospital bed. I had listed Daniel as my emergency contact, certain he'd come. But he never did. Not once. I had told myself he was too busy, that he didn't want to see me weak. But reading his words now, I understood. He had wanted to come. Vanessa had told him I refused. The memory of that hospital room closed in on me. The beeping monitors, the sharp scent of disinfectant, the way the curtain swayed whenever a nurse came in. I remembered staring at the ceiling tiles, pretending not to care that no one sat at my bedside. I had even convinced myself it was what independence looked like, managing alone. All the while, he had been waiting, car keys in hand, only to be turned back by her lies. I set the phone down on the table, unable to look at the screen anymore. My hands went to my pantry instead, opening the creaky door and rummaging through shelves for something, anything, to steady me. That was when my eyes fell on the old Maxwell House coffee can sitting behind the flower. Blue paint faded, lid slightly dented, but instantly recognizable. I'd used it for years to collect loose change for Daniel's school lunches and baseball trips. My chest tightened at the sight. I didn't reach for it yet, not then, but the image branded itself into my mind. Something about it felt unfinished, like it still had a role to play. Later that day, Mrs. Patterson came by with a small dish of her apple crisp, steam still rising under the foil. "You shouldn't be alone so much, Maggie," she said softly as she set it on my counter. Her presence filled the quiet, her eyes kind but searching. We sat together in the living room, the snow falling in slow curtains outside. I told her about the calendars, about the texts that had changed tone like a voice fading down a hallway. She listened, her fingers laced in her lap. When I finally paused, she shook her head with a sad smile. "You used to talk about him all the time," she said. "Every little thing he did, how he fixed your porch light or the new soup recipe he tried. And then, one day, you stopped. You told me it was too painful to bring him up. I thought maybe it was just part of life. But now I see. It was her." Her words pierced me more deeply than I expected. I realized that I had cooperated in my own silencing, trimming Daniel out of conversations to protect myself from the hurt. And in doing so, I had helped Vanessa's version of reality take root. The snow outside muffled the world, wrapping the neighborhood in hush. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the framed photos on my mantel. Daniel as a boy in his Little League uniform, Daniel at his college graduation, Daniel on his wedding day, standing beside Vanessa. Each picture felt like a door slammed shut. I whispered, almost to myself, "She didn't just keep me away from him. She told him I wanted the distance." The truth of it hit me like ice water. All the missed birthdays, the empty hospital room, the messages that felt cold. They weren't him turning away from me. They were him believing what she told him. Believing that his mother had moved on, had chosen solitude. I covered my face with my hands, my palms damp with tears I hadn't noticed spilling. My son had died thinking I no longer needed him. That was the cruelty of it, sharper than the grave itself. Mrs. Patterson reached over, squeezing my arm. "Don't shoulder all the blame, Maggie. You can't fight lies you never knew were told." Her comfort was kind, but it couldn't soften the jagged edge of the realization. Vanessa hadn't only barred me from the funeral. She had rewritten the narrative of my love, piece by piece, until Daniel believed a version of me that never existed. I stared at the Maxwell House can in the pantry, its outline clear in my memory. My instincts whispered that Daniel had left something for me, something that had survived the erasure. But before I could dwell on it, my phone lit up on the table. Vanessa's name glowed across the screen. My hand hovered, trembling, over the green button. When Rick slid the envelope across his desk, I recognized Daniel's handwriting before I even touched it. But that moment came only after a pilgrimage I had put off too long. That morning, I bundled myself into my old wool coat, scarf wrapped high against the January cold, and drove to Riverside Cemetery. The radio played softly, but I barely heard it. My hands stayed clenched at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, knuckles stiff with more than just cold. Section C, Plot 247. I had memorized the numbers, but it still felt like I was trespassing into an unfamiliar neighborhood. The snow was thin, brittle underfoot, crunching with each careful step. My breath came out in pale clouds. I carried a bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers that had lain across my counter the night Vanessa told me Daniel was long gone. The headstone was modest, just his name and dates. No epitaph, no beloved son, no cherished husband. I knelt, the cold seeping through my gloves, and brushed snow from the granite. The stone felt smoother than it should have, almost new, like it hadn't been there long enough to belong. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered, laying the lilies down, petals pressed against the icy ground, white on white.
I should have fought harder. I should have known. My voice wavered, but I didn't stop. She kept me from you, but I'm here now. I'll carry you with me until I join you.
The wind pushed against my back, tugging at my scarf like an answer. I stayed until my knees ached and my fingertips burned. Then I rose and walked back to the car, each step deliberate, as though leaving him again was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Downtown Cincinnati felt worlds away. Traffic lights blinked red. People hurried along the sidewalks bundled in coats and gloves, carrying coffee cups that sent up small tendrils of steam. Life rushed forward around me, but I moved slowly, as if the weight of the cemetery still clung to my coat. Rick Coleman's office occupied a converted brick building just off Main. Inside, the warmth was immediate, the smell of old paper and polished wood settling around me like a library. Books lined the shelves, thick legal tomes whose spines were worn from years of handling. A brass lamp glowed on his desk. "Maggie," he said gently, standing as I entered. He was in his late 40s, with steady eyes behind square glasses, a voice that carried both authority and patience. "Thank you for coming in." I managed a nod and sat opposite him. My hands twisted in my lap. I had braced myself for something clinical, a matter of signatures and paperwork. I hadn't expected the envelope that sat on the desk between us, my name written in Daniel's careful handwriting. The sight of it nearly undid me. The loop of the G, the tilt of the M, it was his, without question, a living fragment of him in this sterile office. My breath caught, and I pressed my lips together to keep from sobbing. Rick folded his hands. "Before we go through the will, Daniel asked me to give this to you personally. He left specific instructions that you read it first, in private if you prefer." My fingers hovered over the envelope. The paper felt heavier than it should, as though carrying his voice. I shook my head at Rick's offer to step out. "No. Stay. If I read it alone, I might not believe it's real." He gave a solemn nod and leaned back, giving me space. I tore the flap carefully, almost reverently, and slid the pages free. 4 sheets of lined paper, written in blue ink. The first word blurred immediately. Mom. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve and began again. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it through. I'm sorry for that. I need you to know the truth, because for too long you were living in a version of our life that wasn't real." His voice filled my head, steady and earnest, as though he were sitting across from me again. "I hired an investigator because something didn't add up. You vanished from my life so gradually I almost didn't notice at first. Vanessa told me you were pulling away, that you needed distance, that you felt smothered. It didn't sound like you, but I trusted her. I thought maybe I'd failed you somehow. But then I saw the patterns, the canceled visits, the unanswered calls, and I couldn't ignore it anymore." The words blurred again. My heart hammered so loudly I thought Rick must hear it. The investigator found everything. Messages intercepted, calls diverted, emails deleted. She kept us apart on purpose. I confronted her. She admitted it. She said she was afraid of competing with you. I told her that wasn't love, that love doesn't require cutting someone else out. But she didn't understand. She stole years from us, Mom. Years we can never get back. But she never stole my love for you. Not once. My hand shook as I lowered the page. Rick's eyes flicked to mine, and he gave a quiet nod, like permission to let the tears fall. I continued. "That's why I changed my will. Everything I have, savings, the house, insurance, it all goes to you. Not to punish her, though she'll see it that way. But because you're my family. You always were. You raised me alone when Dad left. You worked double shifts to keep me fed. You taught me that love means showing up.
I never stopped needing you, Mom. Even when she tried to make me believe I didn't.
The page trembled in my hand.
There's more. I left something in the Maxwell House can. I know you still keep it on the pantry shelf. Inside, you'll find the bracelet you gave me at 16. My son, my pride, my joy. I wore it for years. I kept it because it reminded me of who I am. And you'll find a key. It's for a safety deposit box. There are things there I want you to have, things that tell the story she tried to erase. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I'm sorry I didn't figure it out sooner. I'm sorry for the silence you lived with. But know this, you were never unloved. Not for a single day. She stole time, but she never stole us. The letter ended with 3 words written larger than the rest. I love you. I pressed the pages to my chest, my tears soaking the ink. For the first time since that terrible phone call, my grief wasn't empty. It was filled with his voice, his clarity, his love. Rick gave me a moment, then cleared his throat. There's also the will. Daniel transferred all assets to your name. The house in Anderson Township, his accounts, his insurance, it's all legally binding. Vanessa hasn't been informed yet. I blinked at him, stunned. She doesn't know? Not yet. She will, soon enough. But he was very thorough. Rick slid a folder toward me. There are documents here, and the investigator's report if you wish to see it. I couldn't yet. The letter was enough. I reached into my purse and pulled out the Maxwell House can lid I had tucked there earlier that morning, almost as if I'd known. I had checked inside before coming, coins rattling softly against tissue paper. I unwrapped it again, revealing the silver bracelet, tarnished but still engraved with my words, and the small brass key tied with string. My fingers curled around the bracelet. Its weight was slight, but it felt like an anchor, proof of continuity, proof that even through years of silence, my boy had been reaching back to me. Rick's voice softened. He wanted you to know that none of this was your fault. I nodded, unable to speak. The office felt hushed, as though the very walls were holding their breath. Outside, traffic passed, muffled by the double-paned windows. Life continued, but mine had been forever altered. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, its cool metal warming against my skin. The key I tucked carefully back into the tissue. Daniel had entrusted me not only with his estate, but with the truth. Vanessa had no idea. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt chosen. And as I left Rick's office, the bracelet clinking softly with each movement, I realized the story wasn't finished. Not yet. She looked smaller than I remembered, clutching tissues like they could hold her whole world together. It was a warm afternoon in April 2022 when Rick asked us both to sit across from each other at his office table. The light slanted through tall windows, striking the polished oak surface in long golden stripes. A box of tissues sat at Vanessa's elbow, already crumpled from her nervous twisting. She kept dabbing at her face, though no real tears had fallen yet. Her hair was pinned loosely, strands escaping as if even her appearance could no longer hold its composure. I sat straight-backed in my chair, my hands folded calmly in front of me. The silver bracelet Daniel had saved clinked softly as I shifted. Every sound in that room seemed magnified. The shuffle of papers, the tick of Rick's brass clock on the shelf, the faint groan of the chair as Vanessa shifted. It struck me how different she looked now compared to the first day I met her. At Daniel's wedding, her smile had been too tight, her grip on his arm too firm. I'd told myself it was nerves, but now, recalling it under the filter of truth, I saw it for what it was, a hunger for control, already budding, already set on wrapping itself around him. Rick cleared his throat and spoke with that measured tone lawyers must practice. Mrs. Carter, as you know, Daniel's will leaves the house to Maggie, along with the rest of his assets.
but Maggie has expressed an alternative arrangement. We are here today to clarify and to sign the necessary agreements. Vanessa's lips pressed into a hard line. Her fingers shredded another tissue. He changed the will without telling me. She cut herself off, her eyes darting to me, wide with accusation and something else. Fear. I held her gaze without flinching. He changed it because he discovered the truth. Her face drained of color. What truth? Rick placed a folder between us, but didn't open it. His job was to mediate, not inflame. The air between Vanessa and me, however, was already charged. I leaned forward just slightly, my voice steady. That you intercepted my calls, that you deleted my emails, that you lied to him about me, about what I wanted. Her hands stilled, the tissue crumpled in her grip. She stammered. I was afraid. You were always so close to him. He would light up when you came around. And me? I felt invisible. I thought if you stayed away, maybe he'd love me more. Maybe he wouldn't notice what I couldn't give him. Her confession hung heavy in the room, mixing jealousy with fear like smoke and gasoline. Rick shifted slightly, his pen resting idle. Mrs. Carter, are you confirming that you intentionally blocked communication between Daniel and his mother? She swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, but you don't understand. I did it for us, for our marriage. I loved him. The words stung, but I breathed deeply, steadying myself. You loved him wrong. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with anger. Don't you dare! I raised a hand, quiet but firm. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to settle. I unfolded the folder Rick had given me earlier. Inside were the papers Daniel had signed, the investigator's report, the legal declarations that backed every word of his letter. But I didn't push them toward her. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a worn leather album. Its spine was cracked, its corners frayed from decades of turning. This, I said softly, sliding it across the table toward her, is Daniel. She frowned. What is this supposed to prove? I opened it to the first page. Daniel at age 5, standing in our small backyard, grinning wide with missing front teeth, holding up the baseball glove I'd saved for weeks to buy him. The sun had bleached his hair golden in that picture. Every page, I said, turning slowly, is a reminder of what you tried to erase. His first bike ride, his science fair project, his college acceptance letter. These are the moments you told him I abandoned. But I was there. I was always there. Her hand trembled as she reached out, fingertips brushing the glossy photo. Her breath hitched as she turned another page. Daniel in his cap and gown. My arms around him, pride radiating in my smile. Her lips quivered. I didn't know he kept these. He didn't just keep them, I said. He cherished them. Even when you told him I didn't care, these memories lived in him. You couldn't erase that. Her composure cracked then. She clutched the album to her chest, her shoulders shaking. Finally, tears fell. Real ones, messy and unguarded. I loved him wrong, she whispered. I let the silence hold for a moment. The ticking clock was the only sound, counting out the beats of a truth finally spoken. Then I spoke clearly, my voice carrying both firmness and mercy. Justice doesn't mean cruelty. This isn't for you. It's for Daniel. The money, every cent, will go into the Daniel Carter Foundation. It will help families stay connected, so no mother has to sit in silence wondering why her son never came. You may keep the house, because he wanted you safe, but the rest is no longer yours to twist. Vanessa's head lifted, eyes red-rimmed. Why? Why give me the house after what I did? Because punishment isn't my aim, I answered. Daniel's memory is, and because I refuse to become what you accused me of, someone who takes love away. Rick cleared his throat again, sliding the papers forward. If both parties are in agreement, we can sign. My hand was steady as I picked up the pen. Vanessa hesitated, Then with a broken sigh, she signed too. The scratch of ink on paper sounded like a final gavel. When it was done, I closed the album and placed it gently back in my bag. I rose slowly, smoothing my coat. Vanessa sat motionless, her hands flat on the oak table, eyes distant. As I turned to leave, her voice followed me, low and trembling. "What will you do with me now?" I paused at the doorway, looking back at her, the woman who had stolen years, but was now just a figure hunched in defeat. "That," I said softly, "depends on what you do with yourself." 6 months later, a package arrived on my doorstep with Daniel's name on the label. It was a Sunday morning in late October 2023, the kind of morning where the air carried both chill and promise. Leaves skittered across the porch in shades of amber and rust. My garden beds were still half full, tomatoes straggling against the cold, marigolds gone brittle. But near the fence line, the lilies I had planted months earlier stood stubborn and tall, defying the season with one last bloom. I bent to pick up the box. It was small, light, but my chest tightened when I saw his name printed in bold letters. Daniel Carter. For a moment, I simply stood there, cradling it against my sweater, the air sharp in my lungs. Inside, wrapped in plain brown paper, was a wooden frame. The photograph nearly took my breath away. Daniel, laughing, sun in his hair, standing in what looked like a community garden. His sleeves were rolled, his hands dirty from work, and his smile so unguarded that it filled the whole picture. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a folded note in Vanessa's handwriting. "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. I'm learning." I sank into the porch chair, the wood cool against my back. The note trembled in my hand. I wasn't ready to forgive her fully, not after the years she'd stolen. But something in those words softened the edges of my anger. Perhaps she was learning. Perhaps Daniel's absence had finally cracked her open in ways his presence never could. Through the window behind me, I could see the Maxwell house can sitting on the pantry shelf. I had put it back in its old place months ago, no longer just a container of coins, but an heirloom. Inside it rested the silver bracelet and the brass key, wrapped in tissue as if waiting patiently for my hand. Sometimes I touched it when the grief felt heavier than usual. It reminded me that even in silence, Daniel had trusted me with his truth. The Daniel Carter Foundation had grown more quickly than I expected. What began as a small grant in his name now reached across the city. Grandparents were reuniting with grandchildren. Estranged parents were finding ways back to their children's lives. Letters poured in, handwritten, shaky with age, from people who said things like, "Because of the foundation, I finally held my granddaughter for the first time in 7 years." Each story was both balm and ache. That morning, as the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the open window, I pulled on my gardening gloves and stepped into the yard. The soil was cool and damp under my nails as I knelt among the lilies and tomatoes. I worked slowly, pressing bulbs into the ground for next spring, whispering to the earth as though Daniel could hear me. "See, sweetheart, I'm planting again. I'm rooting myself the way you asked me to in your letter." The breeze rustled the branches overhead. For a moment, I imagined his laugh carried in the sound, the same laugh captured in the framed photo now sitting on my kitchen table. I glanced down at my left hand. The ring my mother once wore glinted faintly in the autumn light. Its presence reminded me that roots stretch further back than we can see, that we are always part of something larger than grief. By mid-morning, the garden beds were tidy again, the bulbs tucked in, ready for a season of rest before their bloom. I brushed dirt from my gloves and sat back on my heels, breathing in the mingled scents of soil, coffee, and fallen leaves. The world no longer felt like a closed door. It felt like a threshold. I thought of Daniel's final words in his letter, words I'd repeated to myself on nights when sleep would not come. She stole years from us, but she never stole my love. I placed my hands flat on the earth, steady, grounded. I still miss you, sweetheart, I whispered. But now, when I say it, I smile. When I look at the lilies blooming by my garden fence, I feel Daniel's laughter still echoing in the breeze. His greatest gift to me wasn't money or property. It was the reminder that love, when it's true, can't be erased by lies or even by death. In this life, if we choose compassion over bitterness, families can heal and broken ties can be mended. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own memories, or simply let me know what it stirred in you. After all, love grows stronger when it's spoken aloud.